Okay, thank you all for being here. Welcome back to this today's second session. This session, as I told you early on before the lunch break, is the PhD student session. And as you know, we arranged a very nice program with a number of presentations from both mature stage students and initial stage students. So yeah, before getting into the session, I want to explain a bit the organization. So we basically have 2 mature stage presentation followed by 8 initial stage presentations. So we have in total 10 students that that have to present something. And I want to thank you all because I receive a lot of requests, so great participation and enthusiasm. So thank you so very much. And okay, so considering the organization, we have this presentation. Each presentation will be followed by a small question and answer session. Of course, we just have 2 hours, so we have to fit all the students in these 2 hours. So there will be just small question and answer sections, but I really hope that we will have participation from the connected, let's say, experts in the field. Okay, so in addition to question and answer session, I'll give you links to online forms. And I ask you to fill up the online forms to give your feedback. So all the students are asked to fill out the online form to give your feedback about the quality of the presentation and these type of things. So for each student, I'll give you a link to the online form, and during the talk, you have time to fill up. Okay. And yeah, that's it. So here is the list of the presentations that we have. So for the mature state presentation, there will be 10 minutes plus 5 minutes question and answer. And for the initial stage presentation, we'll have 8 minutes plus 4 minutes for question and answers. Okay, I'll present you all one by one. I think that will be very challenging to pronounce all your names in a correct way, but I'll try it. And I also wanted to thank let's say the committee, the experts that are currently connected. So thank you, Andre Van Horn, Barbara Russo, Nicola Fetter, Andrea, and Xiao is also connected, I think, right? Okay, so I think that the first speaker is Harald.
Yeah, I can go ahead. Yes. Hi.
Okay. So you can share your screen, right?
Yeah, I try. It says I cannot share if you share right now. So
can you try again?
No. Yeah, now it's working. So do you see my screen?
Yep.
The PowerPoint, I guess. I hope. So can everybody see my PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, perfect. Yeah, I will start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harald Feudel. I'm a PhD student in the 4th year in the University of Innsbruck in Austria. I currently pursue my PhD with the working definition risk-based data validation in machine learning-based software systems, supervised by Professor Dr. Michael Felderer. Yeah, before I start my presentation, I will briefly introduce you a short agenda. First of all, I will motivate very briefly the topic. Then I will present the statement of the problem. Then I will go ahead with the approach to address the problem. Then I will show you some main parts, so the progress so far of my work. And last but not least, I will shortly speak about how I want to evaluate my approach. Yeah, so starting with the motivation, we heard already yesterday a lot about it. Machine learning systems are really an integral part of our daily life. And false decisions of such systems can have serious consequences. We heard yesterday about the autonomous cars, for example, which can even damage humans. There can also be huge monetary losses. And so we can conclude that the quality assurance is a very important need in such systems, but it is rather difficult because of the behavioral dependency on data of such systems. So the data quality is quite important in machine learning based software systems. So what can we do? We can try to validate the data to get sure that the data are correct. So what is data validation? Mainly we can say it's continuously checking and monitoring the serving data to assess its quality. So the data are mainly checked against defined schemas, value ranges, and further expectations. For example, if the data types are correct. Some techniques which are used for example, hypothesis testing, correlation analysis, some simple aggregations like summing up something, or central tendencies, for example, the mean or the median. Yes, what is the current status of data validation? Most approaches today they validate the data mostly only at the beginning of the pipeline, of the data pipeline. So they do not consider the so-called training serving queue. So what is this? This is a situation where the serving data are different than the data used to train the model. So this is basically the deployment phase where we go from the offline training to the online, where to enter the production environment. So such approaches typically do not consider the consistency of the data transformation logic between the training phase and then the actual serving phase. They do not consider pipeline jungles or dead experimental code paths, which were used only for training. They do not consider unstable data dependencies or even bugs in the finally implementation code, which is used in the production environment. So additionally, no exhaustive data validation is possible because of the huge amount of different features, data input signals such systems have. Imagine a deep learning system which has thousands of different features. You cannot validate and concentrate on each feature in depth. Additionally, developers define the data validation checks mostly on themselves. So they have to define where to start and to stop the data validation. It's named data validation prioritization, and they have to define the thresholds and which techniques they want to use. It's called the data validation rigor. So the main point of my work is to answer which features to validate and how thorough to validate them. So to answer this point, I developed a risk-based data validation approach. So the aim of this risk-based data validation approach is to prioritize the features in such machine learning-based software systems for addressing common problems in data validation. As I mentioned, that the complete validation is practically unfeasible, or the subjective determination of the validation rigor, or that not considering this training serving queue. So we can say the idea of my approach is to estimate the risk of poor data quality for each feature. So I tried to use the risk-based testing approach from the traditional software testing domain, where a risk is typically determined by the probability that something happens and the impact such an event has. So in my approach, I try to determine the risk with the probability that the feature is of low quality, of low data quality, and the impact of this low data quality feature on the performance of the final machine learning model. Yeah, here on this slide, we see a graphical representation of my approach. On the top, this is the risk, which I aim to determine for each feature. As we know, a feature basically can consist of different data input signals. And with this determined risk, I want to guide the data validation, prioritization, and the rigor. So going a little bit into more detail, how can we determine the probability factor? I use quality-related factors as the data source quality, some data smells, the data pipeline quality. I will explain it in a little more detail on the next slide. And on the other side, for the impact, I decided to use the so-called feature importance. Yeah. Going into a little bit into more detail for the probability factor to answer how likely is it that this feature or this data has low data quality, I decided to focus on the quality of the data sources itself. So for example, how is the availability of this data source, the timeliness, is it reacting fast or very slow, are there design smells, for example, the quality of the metadata is very bad, or there are schema smells. As a next point, I try to use data smells. Data smells are related to code smells. They only indicate that there is might something wrong. It's no error or bug itself. It's only an indicator that there might be something wrong. Examples would be miscoding smells, that a date or a time is encoded as a string. Scaling smells, that data values vary widely, and so on. As a next point for the probability that there is the probability that there is low data quality, I decided to use the data pipeline quality. There is here I will consider issues of the implemented data pipeline that can affect the quality of the process data. Examples would be bugs in the software code or in the data pipeline architecture. For example, data integration, transformation, or over and underflow errors. How can we measure such things? There would be the possibility to use adapted software quality models, which measure the possible influences on the quality of the process data. For example, code smells, the common libraries which use many people, the pandas versus NumPy, they handle missing values differently by standard. So one tool considers the missing values and others not. So I have to pay attention to this. One additionally code smell would be to omit data quality checks, which are only optional. Yeah, now coming to the impact factor. Here I tried, as I already said, to use this feature importance to determine the impact factor. And what is the feature importance? It's the contribution of a single feature towards the prediction accuracy of the machine learning model. So we can say the more important a feature is, the greater is the impact if this feature is of low data quality. So there are some algorithms available which can measure this. For example, the feature importance ranking measure, the permutation feature importance, or other algorithms like LIME or the harvest algorithm. So finally, when we have determined the probability and the impact factor, we can computate the risk values for each features. So what can we do now? We can assign then the features to different risk levels. Then we can also assign the different data validation techniques to these risk levels. An example would be that I use a correlation analysis or the hypothesis testing, and additionally fine-grained checks only on the highest risk level, and for example the completeness tests or the uniqueness tests on the lowest risk level. So I can prioritize my features with this, and I can make the derivation of the rigor I want to apply. For example, I can set the limits of data value ranges very widely or rather small. I can determine the strength of the constraints, and I also can determine which techniques I want to use. Yeah, now a brief overview of some points of my work until today. I worked a little bit on data smells, so I defined some kind of smells, data type smells, for example, data believability smells, understandability smells, and so on. A further rather big point in my work was a so-called data source assessment framework, which aims to assess the quality of the data source itself. So, for example, we divided it into representational data store quality. So how does the data store present or represent different artifacts, and so on. Yeah, now coming to the planned evaluation of my approach. First, I want to conduct expert interviews to test how is the acceptance by practitioners for this approach. I will use this so-called technology acceptance model. And additionally, I want to conduct an industrial case study in the domain of manufacturing, industrial Internet of Things, where we have a lot of machines, a lot of sensors connected and delivering data. Here we see an example of predictive maintenance. So the goal is here to predict the downtimes of machines, and there are already many machines in such environments with very different data sources and technologies and data formats. And yeah, I want to conduct in this setting an industrial case study. Yeah, that was it. Thank you. And I think now I have to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Harold. And I just want to remind you that I put in the chat the link for giving to you a feedback. I ask to you all in the audience to fill up the form. Okay. The form is anonymous, so you can be very honest. Okay, questions from the audience?
I can ask a question if, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, it's Barbara. So yeah, data smell is a very nice term. So can you tell me as an example of data smell that you can find, for example, from the requirements, making it parallel with the technical depth we all know?
Yeah, we defined some categories, some different categories. For example, we have, as I said, the data believability smells. They are also related to technical depth. We made also a short work on technical depth and data quality in such kind of machine learning systems. Should I say some examples of data smells, or?
Yeah, just to make it like to make it clear as an examples, maybe in practice.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, some very basic data smells would be encoding smells that, for example, the data time format is encoded as a string, or integer values are encoded as a float, for example, or the other way around. Some believability smells would be, for example, a so-called dummy value smell. There are some values, for example, this time setting. I don't know the exact term. I think it's the Unix epoch, where the time starts sometimes in 1970. So if such numbers are occurring, it's rather a dummy smell, I say. There are, for example, many more smells. If you like, I can send it.
Yeah, thank you. No,
afterwards.
Thank you. No, it's just so because if you work in production or online, so if you have a data smell, you cannot do anything really, because they come from the the environment. You cannot fix this smell, or in future,
yeah,
or now.
Exactly.
How can you think you can cope with it?
Yes, it's only an indicator which aims to guide where we should set our focus on. So if there are some smells in the production environment, may we have to change the monitoring or the data validation perspective on this kind of data streams where the smells occur.
Okay, so yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but we are running a bit in late already, so I have to shut down this question and answer session and go ahead with the next speaker. So thank you again, Harald.
Thank you
very much. And by the way, if I don't know if there are students that want to contact you and talk more about these things, you can maybe share your email or something.
Yeah. I will share my email in the chat.
Okay, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
So next speaker is Lalit.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Okay, please, can you share your screen and you can start whenever you are ready.
Okay, is it visible?
Yeah.
Great. So this is I just submitted my pre-PhD 8 days back, and this is my first attempt. So more feedback is good for me. So the title is An Approach for Building Domain-Specific Search Engines. So I would, the outline of the presentation is I have a motivation, I have some research questions, my contributions around that, and implementation in the summary. Right? Yeah, these are some publications. So let me start with crowdsourcing. I'm sure all of us know about crowdsourcing, and there's a growing interest on crowdsourcing, more so with COVID and situations where most of us are connected digitally rather than physically. India, I come from India, and I'm doing my PhD in India. So we have large setup even from the government of India to promote crowdsourcing, both in policy making and ideas and so on and so forth. So crowdsourcing is certainly a thing that everyone recognizes its importance, right? I started with the same. Then I went about trying to understand what are the concerns in crowdsourcing. We looked at the literature, and then we realized there are certainly quality concerns in terms of crowdsourcing. And there have been made some attempts in terms of using some statistical methods, some machine learning, game theory, and so on and so forth. We also conducted an online survey with about 229 participants trying to give their feedback and what they see as concerns in terms of crowdsourcing. What came out from that is there are some questions that we worded to see what their responses are, giving them a free flow in terms of giving additional inputs. But we try to, based on the literature that we saw on concerns in quality in crowdsourcing, and also coming from the background of software engineering, we try to bring some aspects in terms of completeness, consistency, and correctness, which are kind of respected, well respected in the industry, research academy, and even in the standards. So we try to model some of our questions to see what their input is. What came out is, yeah, certainly knowledge base, which kind of ties to the completeness, credibility, coherence, query alignment. These seem to be some of the top concerns in terms of or areas of improvement in terms of adoption of crowdsourcing, right? Other than what exists already in the research or in the literature. So from crowdsourcing, I took question answers looking at the literature for various reasons. Then I looked at quality concerns. Then I tried to look at the adoption of completeness. Now, during that process, what we realized is building a knowledge base is critical, right? For doing any assessment, for doing any quality assessment. And that would mean trying to do a knowledge base for the entire world or for any open domain is a really a trouble. And there are many papers which talk about not even trying to an attempt of trying to build the knowledge base of the world. While there are knowledge graphs, etc., but yeah, there is certainly a concern. So we try to see if we could go about building a knowledge base for a domain. And when we looked at what does it mean in terms of building a knowledge base for a domain, it kind of boiled down in terms of requiring a domain specific search engine. And that's where my title in terms of domain specific search engine comes up. Now, why do we need domain specific search engines when and there is a lot of literature that goes on page ranking, a lot of popular generic search engines that are there. But yeah, we know there are still concerns. We try to do a quick dip study in terms of what are the results. There is certainly concerns. I try to put the pictures of all the top 4 generic search engines, Google, Baidu, Yandex, Bing. All in all, when I try to put HTTP properties as my query word, most of them talked about some real estate properties, or they tried to promote Microsoft and Oracle, not necessarily the World Wide Web Consortium, which is actually the organization that we could say authoritatively has some control on HTTP, right? So there are certainly concerns in terms of generic search engines. There are research that is going on generic search engines, and there is a space for domain-specific search engines, and that's also relevant for us in terms of quality control in crowdsourcing. So what does it mean in terms of domain-specific? I mean, you try to, when you search, you generally search for a keyword which is related to a domain, but a domain-specific search engine would also bring aspects of not just giving results which are less ambiguous, which are more relevant, but also try to bring some specificity. So if you look at when I type Wells Fargo in a Yahoo Finance, it would not only talk about getting the results of Wells Fargo, but also would talk about how is that index doing, or what is the equity, where is it listed, how is that market doing, unlike a generic search engine which would talk in general about Wells Fargo. So a domain specific brings that domain specific angle, not anything and everything in the world on that term, right? We further went about doing an SMS, a systematic mapping study, to understand what are the observations in terms of building domain specific search engines, what is their relevance. And we also went about doing a systematic literature review in terms of what are the research areas. I'm not going to get into the depth of SLR, just want of time, but yeah, both kind of reiterated the importance of domain-specific search engine. They also talked about some concerns in terms of adoption of domain-specific search engine. They also talked about Google or generic search engines becoming more personalized. So there is a time period 2014-15 when domain-specific search engines were picking up, and then suddenly the generic search engines personalization kind of tapered down the research on domain-specific, but still it stays relevant at least for the last 2-3 years. So just to bring everyone a perspective of what a search engine contains, you have crawlers that are crawling. They have a specific set of seed URLs, which is unlike a generic search engine where it goes about crawling anything and everything in the world. But yeah, you have URLs which kind of feed into starting in that domain. Go about crawling, then you go about classifying, then you go about trying to index, and then go about ranking and show that domain specificity. In case of Yahoo Finance, it could be the stock. In case of Google Scholars, it could be the top researchers, top topics, citations, so on and so forth. So what are our research questions? What makes a search engine specific to a domain? We try to answer this through an SLR. So I'm not going to get into the depth of that. But the next question is, what are subdomains of a domain, and are there enough? Give me a second. Are there enough URLs that represent subdomains of a domain? What we mean by that is, yeah, I want to go build an academic related search engine that could be, let's say, similar to Google Scholar. But if I get only papers that are related to computer science, or if I get papers that are related to the software engineering and computer science, does it make sense to say Google Scholar represents the scholarly articles in academic? Not so, because yeah, there are many other topics other than computer science, and there should be an equal representation of, or at least there should be a diversity that exists. So we try to answer that with question 2. Now the following question was in terms of knowledge base. A lot of research has gone into knowledge graphs, but yeah, ontologies, right from the days of Socrates or those philosophers to the internet world with semantic web, continues to have its own claim, continues to have its own area of improvement in terms of research. So we thought representing the knowledge base in terms of an ontology makes more sense. So we looked at if there is growing domain, if there is growing content, how do we keep this ontology, or how do we keep the knowledge base up to date? That's where we talked about some approaches. And then we have these results. How do we know those results? The search, when someone is making a search, they get some results. Is it the typical page ranking algorithms which are more popularity based? Should we actually look at some, if we're with some sensitive areas like health or security, where it's not necessarily the popularity, but it's more of the credibility that could be required.
Sorry, Lalit, to interrupt you, but just to say that you have 2 minutes, so if you can go.
Was it? I thought I had 10 minutes.
If you can go rapidly to, let's say, if you can give us an overview on your, let's say, findings and
Yep, certainly. Sorry.
If you can conclude rapidly.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we tried to come up, we looked at the literature, then we tried to come up with some, and we looked at the literature, we saw there are concerns, and then we came up with an approach. What we did interesting with that approach is we wrote our own piece of crawler, and we wrote our own piece of crawler based on something called ABC, Artificial Bee Colony, which is more of a meta-heuristic based. And we felt that is certainly comparable, even if you look at some industry crawlers like Nutch or a Storm crawler or a Crawler4j, both from performance and a retrieval perspective. Artificial is an interesting topic. So if you need more details, please reach me out. I'll be more than happy to clarify. We also came up with a measurement technique to see the seed URLs that we identified, are they relevant, and what does relevance mean? What does that harvest rate mean? So we put some metric. Then we try to implement our approach in the information security. So we saw, yeah, our approach actually give more seed URLs, more child URLs as compared to any of the existing models. We extended the entropy, which is trying to find the diversity, and we saw our approach actually went about identifying more subdomains than any of the existing approaches, whether it is clustering or topic modeling or graphs and so on and so forth. I'll go fast. I'll not go to the literature. Ontology enrichment from text. What we first wanted to realize is there a tipping point to say, yeah, you have enough domain content to say, yeah, you want to enrich an ontology, because there are at least 20 survey papers which talked about ontology enrichment. And there is still a research that goes on knowledge graphs and ontology enrichment. So what is that tipping point to identify ontology can be reached? We put some models, and then we finally concluded, yeah, there is an approach for us to say, yeah, where it saturates, and that's the tipping point for us to say, yeah, there is enough content, or there is newness in the content for us to go about enriching the ontology. So further, we implemented the LSTM approach, long short-term memory, which looks at text. The relevance of LSTM is it has the beauty of keeping the remembrance and the forgetfulness. So when you're passing a content in unstructured text, there are instances where you need to drop words because it is not relevant. There are instances of the words. That's where we felt LSTM could be more relevant in terms of enriching an ontology, which is kind of the state of the art from ontology enrichment perspective. I'm not putting the results, but yeah, it's primarily because we just submitted into a ISDM. Then in terms of credibility assessment,
sorry to interrupt you, but you are already more than 3 minutes out of time. So if you can rapidly conclude this, otherwise we cannot see all the other students.
I know.
Okay? Thank you.
I know. I'm sorry. So we came up with an approach in terms of credibility assessment, more in terms of genres of a web page, where it is, you look at a web page and you know it is related to a research article or a help document or a shopping site, and that becomes an approach in terms of credibility assessment. So we came up with some automated model. We have some API based so that people can go about putting some URLs and get the web credibility. And we compared with Alexa ranking, Web of Trust, and see, yeah, I think it makes sense. So we finally implemented this in the domain of information security. This is actually funded by Department of Science and Technology. Last slides. So we saw there is a relevance in terms of if you have a search engine, a domain-specific search engine for information security, a lot can come out in terms of relevance. And we have a working model for it. Yeah, I'll not go into the future work, but that's pretty much.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that there is, we can have a very quick questions if there is any.
So here's Michael, one short question. Do you plan to evaluate your approach in another domain as well, besides security? Because the domain seems to be an important variable in your approach.
Absolutely. So while the domain-specific search engine we went about doing for information security, in every activity or in every scope that we did, we tried at least a couple of domains rather than just restricted to information security. Okay, so it is generalizable for other domains.
Okay, and you show that by applying it to other domains as well, at least one more domain.
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. I remind you that I put the link for the feedback form in a chat. So I'll ask you again to fill it up. And so let's move forward to the next speaker. Next speaker is Davide Molinelli.
Hi.
And all the next speakers are all initial stage, okay? While the first two speakers were mature stage. So right now we have a number of presentations that should last 8 minutes, and I really ask you to respect the time limit, otherwise there will be problems in the end to fit the other students, okay? Thank you.
So, do you see the right screen?
No, it's the presenter view.
Yeah, it's the
I need to change the. Okay, this is right now. Okay, so
view.
no, so, is
Yeah, maybe if you have two screens, you can try to. Okay, now it's fine.
okay. Thank you. So I am Davide Molinelli, and I am a PhD student at the Schaffhausen Institute of Technology. I am a PhD student at initial stage, so I start the 1st of April, and this is the presentation of what I collected during these few months, and I hope that you can give me some feedback and some suggestion. So what I'm currently investigating is how it is possible to measure the quality of interactive autonomous system. Pervasive and intelligent systems are systems which operate in the real world with a high degree of autonomy. So the system, to be successful, need to face and be able to manage the dynamicity, the continuous evolution, the uncertainty, and the non-determinism that characterize the open environment in which they work. Indeed, the real world, in the real world, the people show always new behaviors and needs. So the system must be able to learn new requirements and evolve accordingly to guarantee that the user needs are satisfied. And this implies the possibility to face completely new scenarios and contradictory requirements and evolving requirements. Therefore, the design of intelligent system is changing from the need to express simply specific functional requirement toward the need to consider the expectation that derive from the use of the system. So one of the main goals that we have to reach is to define probabilistic, statistical, and robust metrics that can help to qualify the intelligence of autonomous systems that operate in contexts where users have an active role and represent the first cause of uncertainty and non-determinism. So unlike a traditional system whose property can be measured in terms of functional and non-functional requirements, intelligent system can be described through new and emerging attributes that can help to qualify them. So human intelligence system start to establish concrete relationship. And so, for example, trustworthiness can represent the ability of an agent to make correct prediction, perform action, and respond correctly to request and meet the expectation of of the user that can trust the system. Transparency representing instead the clarity with which an agent perform action. So an agent can be considered transparent if its result, the result of its action are completely explainable and interpretable. And then expressiveness can represent the ability to interact with user in a way that is similar to the one humans use to communicate with each other. And finally, the adaptability of a system can qualify the ability of the system to evolve accordingly to the new emerging behavior, and responsiveness can describe how promptly the system can recognize the new expectation and evolve to satisfy them. Other than attributes, we can measure the intelligence of system even through considering risk, because we in those systems we have additional risk that can be classified to qualify the intelligence of autonomous system. For example, misleading behaviors indicate the risk that the system will learn from wrong or illegal behaviors that can compromise the integrity of the system itself. And then there can happen a cascade of failure, because pervasive systems are highly interactive system, so the false value of a system can affect even the value of the interacting agents, leading to failure of multiple systems. And to give some example, Google Maps, for example, is considered a sort of a smart traffic monitoring system that can give information about the state of the road in real time, offering suggestion to avoid road congestion and reach the destination as quickly as possible. And people trust Google Maps because it proved to be a reliable service. However, it has been shown how it is possible to easily deceive the system, generating fake fake road congestion and diverting people to other roads, using a bunch of smartphone and a person which walk slowly on the street, simulating a navigation. So this is an example of a system that in principle is reliable, but have some problem that can be must be measured to avoid misleading behavior and failure. And Microsoft Eye represent another example. Was released by Microsoft and was an attempt to teach a machine how to learn from human interaction. It was launched by Microsoft on Twitter, and it has a short life of 16 hours because rapidly it learned to be racist and offend user with whom it interact. So this is another example of a system that learn from behaviors and can fail because the interaction and the way the system learn is not so robust and smart. And another example can be, for example, Uber, that is a pervasive system which operates in a context characterized by high uncertainty, evolving and contradicting requirements. So in conclusion, now I have this open question that I want to investigate, and those questions are: how can we use for example, machine learning and artificial intelligence to measure the degree of fulfillment of expectation and qualify the degree of intelligence of autonomous system. And the other open question that I have is what technique can be applied to explain and motivate the decision that the intelligence autonomous system make in order to qualify the abilities to learn and operate. So this is the work I collect until now, and this is the direction where my research is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Davide. Okay, there is time for questions.
Davide, thank you. This is Xiaofeng from Uniboden. I have a question. Actually, very interesting the concept you raised about, you know, these expectations. So not the pre-specified requirements. And I saw that's also a focus of one of your research questions. So do you plan, probably it's early, but do you plan to animate, also come up with ways of capturing this kind of expectations, which is more, you know, emergent, not like capturing requirements? So we need a different way.
Yes, one of the goals of my research is to find a way to learn from the behavior of the user and find a way to fulfill the expectation of the user and try to understand where and when new behavior emerge and new need emerge, and the system must be able to evolve accordingly to fulfill the new requirement and the new behavior. I don't know how, in this moment, I don't know what can be the technique that can be used to reach this goal, but this is one of the goal I expect to reach.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question, actually, if I can. So first of all, thank you for this presentation. You mentioned a number of interesting challenges, and you also mentioned the fact that when you have to deal with these systems, there is a lot of uncertainty, right?
Yes.
And my question is, did you develop some kind of techniques or modeling techniques or some metric to measure the degree of existing uncertainty or something like this, or you still have to develop these approaches, or what is the stage of your research in these?
So I start from 3 months ago, so until now I only explore the context and investigate some related work, and for example, I investigate the work of other people like the one on this slide that talk about ultra large scale system, large scale complex ET system, and a technique that is promising, and this LIME, I don't know if you know it, that try to explain the prediction of a classifier. So I try to investigate, but until now I have not developed anything.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Thank you for the references.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, just a short comment. Probably you should also look into self-adaptive systems. I don't know whether you did that already. That's a little bit different than autonomous systems, but probably there are related approaches that you can basically work on in that community.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you again. Davide. So let's go ahead with the next speaker. So next speaker is Andrea Bombarda.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. So hello everyone, I'm Andrea Bombarda and I'm a first year PhD student at the University of Bergamo. And together with my supervisor, Professor Angelo Gargantini, I work on the quality of medical software and system. So first of all, I want to give the motivation of my work. We all know that nowadays the software is spreading in all the processes that are executed by the caregiver in medical sector. So we want that the software has a good quality because a software failure can cause serious damage to patients. Speaking about quality, we can speak about the compliance with the requirements and the specification of the system, but also that the risk of the using of the software has to be reduced to the minimum. There are many standards and regulation in this sector. The first one is the one by the International Electrotechnical Commission that defines which are the life cycle activities that have to be performed when someone wants to develop medical software. And the second one is the one by the FDA, that is the Food and Drug Administration in the US, that define the general principles of software validation. The two documents are really complex, but share many common aspects. The first one is that the medical software must be tested and all the tests must be re-executable at any time. The second one is that the safety properties of the system must be proved because we want to exclude unexpected behavior. The third one is that verification and validation activities have to be performed not only in the testing phase, but also in the design and the coding phase. And the last one is that we must use a well-documented software lifecycle because all the documents are required for the certification of the final product. To comply to these requirements, we propose an approach which exploits two different methods. The first one is that we can use formal and rigorous methods. The second one is applicable when formal and rigorous methods cannot be used and is about apply different validation and verification techniques, such as we did in for convolutional neural networks that I will explain later. For the first method, so the one which exploit formal methods, I propose this case study, which was the development of the software for a pillbox. The pillbox is an array of drawers in which for each drawer we put several pills. And then the pillbox has to signal to the patient when it's time to take the pill or not. So for this case, we exploit this framework, which is the ASMETA framework. With the ASMETA framework, we exploit abstract state machine, which are good to develop medical software because even complex software, because we can use infinite number of states, we can execute them, we can write model, such as in this part of the image. We can execute validation and verification activities during all the phases of the modeling. And then after we have performed validation and verification activity, we can automatically generate the code that in our case, we embedded on an Arduino board. So the steps that we performed was the modeling by refinement. So we wrote several models starting from a simple one. And then step by step, we added several aspects of the system, reaching a final model that was the most complex. We performed validation activities that we execute by using the simulator. So we gave some input to the system and we look which are the outputs given by the system. Then we perform scenario-based testing. So we simulate the behavior of the system against the expected one. And then the last step was the property verification, in which we have identified several safety properties of the system. And then we have written them using CTL and LTL language. And then we have verified all the properties. At this point, we can be sure about the correctness of our model. And so since we generate the final code starting from the model which has been tested and verified, we can obtain a code that is correct by definition. So this was the basic idea of the application of formal methods to medical software development. The second one is the one about the robustness of convolutional neural networks. So we want to verify these networks without using formal methods. And we took the images coming from histological exam from breast cancer, and then we want to verify, we want to classify them using a convolutional neural network. But we want to test not only the accuracy of the CNN, but also the robustness. So we create a set of natural variation, which were something like zoom, translation, brightness variation, and so on. And then we check the behavior of the classifier when an altered image is given to the classifier to be classified. So this is a general behavior of the accuracy. We know, for the example, for the brightness variation, we know that when we don't apply any alteration, we have the maximum accuracy. And then when we increase or decrease the brightness, so when we apply some alteration, we know that the accuracy decreases. In our case, so we tried to enhance the performance of the classifier, but by using several techniques. The first one is the most known one, that is the data augmentation, in which we gave also some altered images into the training set. This is feasible, but requires a huge amount of time to be performed. So we devised this limited data augmentation. The limited data augmentation is the same than as the data augmentation, but requires only the images that cause major degradation to the performance in terms of accuracy. And the third technique that we proposed was the network parallelization, in which we keep the original network that we call C0, and then we put another network in parallel, which was trained only on altered images. Then the output of our complete network was taken by the maximum probability given by one of the two networks. So in this way, we compute the robustness of our system. We define the robustness as the number of points for which the accuracy stay over the final threshold, in our case 0.8 of accuracy. And then we have watched the accuracy and the robustness of our classifier. So we can see that the original classifier C0 has an accuracy of 86%, and the accuracy remain almost the same for all the classifiers. But the robustness with our techniques increase. So we can see that the limited data augmentation, which was the variation of the classical data augmentation, can reach a robustness that is 97%. That is really higher than the standard robustness of the original classifier, that was 73. Also with network parallelization, which requires something like almost 3 hours less than the data augmentation, we can increase a lot the robustness. We can pass from 73 to 81%. So the future work I want to do is to try to apply this robustness analysis also on even kind of neural network, because we know that not only convolutional neural networks are used in medical sector. We can investigate the applicability of other formulas to compute robustness. So this was our proposal, this one. These formulas was our proposal, but obviously we can also evaluate other types of robustness. And then we want to try also the Asmita framework, which was the formal methods I presented before, on other medical systems. Actually, we have already tried on a protocol, that is the PhD protocol used to make medical devices communicating with each other. And then also investigate the applicability of other rigorous methods for medical system and protocols. For example, finite state machine. we have already used this formalism for test sequence generation when the system is a constrained system, but we want to investigate more on this topic. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Questions or suggestions are welcome.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Questions?
Yes, very nice presentation. Thank you. And I have a few questions, but I will limit myself, let's say. For the second part, the image recognition, what I know, I had a student that did a master on that, and I know there is a problem of having like a baseline, so a ground truth. So the images that need to define the ground truth for your evaluation. So one problem is that there is no one single ground truth, and the other is to have an open access to this ground truth, because I mean, you need to have experts saying that this is in fact, for example, a cancer signal, and so labeled, let's say, labeled images are very rare and they're not universal. How do you cope with this? I mean, how your work will cope with this problem?
We found this data set online, which was freely available. Actually, this was not the only one data set we found. There was also other ones, such as the iris data set for the eye iris, and also something for the posture. So there are many websites that provide medical images that were already labeled. So you can find them and then try to train your network on them.
Okay, so sometimes, I mean, also the resolutions of the images might not help in this direction, in the sense that you might not be able to, you know, to use this.
All the images was 50 pixels, so.
And if I can, I have another question on the first case. In the medical software, there are lots of examples of failures that are related to different reasons. One example is Terac 25 machine.
Yes.
And that machine was like really full of failures. And one of the problem was that the Canadian company that built it, was so confident of the software that it moved all the hardware guards. And this caused lots of problems, bad radiations. One of the problem was that also a real-time problem, in the sense that if I'm not wrong, if the operator were able to change the data within 8 seconds, then the computer didn't receive this data and so cannot update the data, and then let's say operate with the wrong data at the end. So the real-time constraints, did you consider in your analysis, in your let's say model, real-time constraints related to these examples, for example?
Then with the Asmeta framework, it's quite difficult because we cannot manage time. So that's why we want to investigate also other kinds of formal methods. Actually, this is something that the developer has to verify in testing phase. So you have to put some guards in the code to be sure that the values are correct. For example, I am currently working on mechanical ventilator for COVID-19 intensive care unit, which is being developed in Milan. I don't know if you know MVM, Milano mechanical ventilator. And then we found by testing several bugs that we have fixed. So I think that the check of the correct values has to be performed during testing phase. If you use a model, in our case, for example, with the Asmeta framework, you can define a limited set of values for a single parameter, and then you can check the correctness of these values because they have to be in the range.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you again, Andrea. I think that we can go ahead with the next speaker. Next one is Daniel Kopp. Are you here, Daniel?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So you can see my presentation?
Sure, you can go.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Daniel Kopp. I'm a PhD student in the first year at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. And my PhD thesis is about automated model-based testing for the continuous improvement of cyber-physical systems using artificial intelligence technologies. First, a short overview. My supervisors are Professor Dr. Michael Felder and Professor Dr. Ruth Boy from the Quality Engineering Group at the University of Innsbruck. The thesis is a cooperation between an industrial company and the university. And there's also an involvement of the University of Columbia. And I will come afterwards into it, what part the University of Columbia is playing here. As I already said in my title, my thesis focuses on cyber-physical systems. First, I will go explain a little bit what cyber-physical system I'm talking about, and go ahead then. Okay, the thesis goes about implementing an algorithm on a real-time cyber-physical system which is running in a closed-loop environment, meaning that the algorithm produces some output and gets then feedback again from the real world, and this is fed again into the algorithm and it reacts again on it. And the research focus here is then that we want to improve with a continuous algorithm this algorithm using machine learning and genetic algorithms, and also to compare different algorithms for testing this algorithm running on the system itself. This cyber-physical system is a servo drive which controls a permanent magnet synchronous motor, which is coming from the industrial company I'm working for. And usually these servo drives are equipped with high-end feedback systems like resolvers or encoder feedback systems to get as a return value from the motors, the velocity, the torque, or even the position. And with this, they can react on the control system. So the control algorithms are reacting with this feedback, and but they are very expensive, and therefore it is tried to implement systems which are using sensorless devices and sensorless controls. But yeah, since we are talking about servo drives, we need high dynamics like fast speed, high torques, or very precise positioning. And in sensorless, we don't have feedback. The only feedback we get is the power and the current of the motor itself. And therefore, such algorithms has to be in the first place be implemented very well, and then they need to be parameterized also very well. And the main goal is then the motivation, and the goal in my thesis is then to first implement such a scientific approach, which was developed on the University of Columbia in this industrial environment, in this industrial device. Then to enable this high dynamics, try to enable such high dynamics with the sensorless control algorithm, and test it with machine learning and genetic algorithms, and also improve the performance of the dynamics. So the goal is a continuous improvement of the control algorithm, and the improvement depends on a test case. So it depends on a use case, which are requested by customers, like we need some precise positioning, we need a broad band of control bandwidths, we need high speed reactions, and so on. Talking about the test framework itself, I would try to make a model-based approach so that the control algorithm can be replaced easily, and we can test also other devices with this test framework. Like I said, I would like to, I'm going to use machine learning and genetic algorithms, so I'm using state-of-the-art methods. And currently in the field of testing here in the company, I have available two different setups for testing. One is the real device itself, so this a real motor with a real device connected to it. And the other is the hill simulation. It's a hardware-in-the-loop simulation where I can simulate the motor and run a lot of tests in a shorter time period. In the image, you see my main idea on how to implement the test framework. So first, a set of parameters has to be generated. Out of it, the test cases will be generated and then executed. First on the hardware-in-the-loop test bench to become good results. After analyzing and evaluation, different sets of the parameters will be generated, and at the end evaluated by executing them on the real test bench, where we can verify then the output of the Hill test bench itself. To the control algorithm, which will be implemented on the device. It's initially developed by Professor Dr. Matthias Beindl et al. At the University of Columbia. Here on the right side, you see such a control loop of a servo drive. So there are a lot of other algorithms involved, like the field weakening, positioning PIDs, speed PIDs. But the main part of this control algorithm is that this small part on the right side, it's called OBSE. It gets as input, as I already mentioned, power and current, and estimates out of it speed and position. Also here in this image, you can see it is we can easily replace it with other control estimation, position and speed estimators, because all of them are working in has the same input and the same output at the end of the day. This algorithm was tested and implemented at the University of Columbia, but never on a real industrial device. So this would have been the first step to get this algorithm from there and implement it. I will come afterwards to my next step, my steps to do, and then I will explain why I have not yet done this implementation. The current status of my thesis is that I'm doing currently a systematic literature review on real-time testing systems, where I'm focusing on the testing activity and type of test equipments used in such real-time testing environments. And I'm also focusing on how often and where algorithms, machine learning and genetic algorithms are used for test case generation, evaluation, and such stuff. My pool contains, at the moment, contains 445 papers, which I got from Scopus and then snowballing. And currently I'm at around 35% of extracted data out of these papers. Now at the end, I will just move a little bit into my next step. So I first want to finish this literature review. And then the idea was to implement initially to this the algorithm into the device, but I will now exchange these two parts because of the current situation in my company, where I don't able to travel to New York to get this algorithm and the idea of it. So I will do this in a second step. It's fine for me because it's a model-based and a model-based implementation. So I'm not. I can implement the algorithm at the end and test it on our current algorithms, which are already implemented on our devices here in the company. So my next step will be then to define and set up the test framework itself. And with this, I'll conclude my presentation and answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Just a very quick question clarification, because maybe I missed something, but you mentioned, model based testing approach, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't get exactly the kind of models you are going to use or you are currently using. Which kind of models?
One model I use is the control algorithm itself. So
so I mean, when you usually adopt a model-based approach, you have under the hood a formal model, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I just wanted a clarification of what kind of formalism do you use?
Okay, here I maybe don't get.
So here, for instance, in this schema, you are currently showing to us that there is this box about generation of test cases, right? So you generate these test cases based on a specific model of the system.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
we have there the different parameters of the algorithm, which could be a PID control or such another control, and these are exchangeable. So they are use different models, even for the parameterization, and then we have also here the generation either is can be different algorithms from machine learning or genetic algorithms.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Other questions? Suggestions or comments or something?
Yeah, if there's time for a quick question,
yeah, sure.
I would like to encourage you to think about what is the unique contribution of your work, because you showed us the SLR you are doing. You came up with more than 400 papers. So what is the knowledge gap you try to address here? I guess that's probably we need to.
Yeah, in this, sorry if I forgot to mention it, in these 400 papers, now out of my 35%, I saw that in combination with real-time testing and closed-loop testing there and machine learning algorithms, I found only 2 papers which are doing this purpose, this combination of real-time testing and machine learning.
That's good. That's good finding. Thanks for clarification.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I forgot it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much again, Daniel.
Yeah.
And okay, so the next speaker is I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it. Haben, right?
Yes. Hello, Guillaume. Guillaume, this is the name.
How is the pronunciation of the name?
Guillaume.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to it.
Please share your screen and then you can start.
Yeah, I didn't authorize. I think I need to quit Zoom and to start again to authorize the. I need just a minute. I'll try to be quick.
We can move ahead and go with the next speakers, and then we
yeah,
will.
that could be better.
We are going to swap next speaker with you.
Thank you.
So next one is Hami Reza, right? Is there Hamid Reza connected? No. I don't think so. He's not replying, so I assume he's not here. So the next one is Jenderson Barros.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Just gonna turn on my
thank you.
My video, and let's see. What else? Okay, so do you guys hear me well and see my presentation?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, so I think we can start, right?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is G. Anderson. I'm in the middle of the second year of my PhD at TU Delft. And my program is in partnership with Adyen, which is a payment company based in Amsterdam that basically connects process payments to several companies that we use in a daily basis, like Netflix and yeah, many others. So I'm gonna provide an overview of my PhD and focus on what I'm currently working. So as system becomes more complex to handle large workloads, reasoning about its behavior in productions becomes harder and harder, right? So just to give a perspective, 5 years ago, this is what Netflix used to look like. And imagine being a developer having to handle this gigantic system. So there are many scenarios that the developer needs some practices and tooling support to understand what is happening. So log and monitoring plays a key role in understanding how complex systems behave in production. And this is even more critical when processing payments, where unexpected behavior might represent merchants losing profit or can even mean fraudulent activity. So a big picture on what happens in login monitoring. So the developer instruments the source code with log statements, and as the system gets built and deployed and executes, it generates log data. And then this log data is transmitted to some endpoint to be processed, to be parsed, to be stored. There are some studies published in this area that is more focused on source code. What are the recurrent changes related to log statements? There are also some people working on how to efficiently parse log messages, how to efficiently store log data. And also, once this data is available for consumption, ops engineering can query to perform several, many different kinds of activities, such as application performance monitoring, root cause analysis, and so on. So this picture is based on a literature review that I did in my first year. It's under submission, but you could take a look at the current state in the link below. So in Adyen numbers, in the context of our industry partner, we are talking about more than 50,000 log statements only in source code production. So we are not even talking about things that are in tests, but only things that are actually executing. And the log data, the system generates 50,000 messages per second in a regular day, and this can be even more critical in special days like Black Friday, and that results on 3 petabytes of log data ingested by the Elasticsearch cluster in a daily basis. And this is, of course, handled by hundreds of developers involved on developing and supporting, covering all the time zones. So log engineering is important, but it's also challenging because many decisions when it comes to logging have a direct impact on the usefulness of log data. So for instance, the developer might forget to add an important log statement. And here's an example of Apache Hadoop, which is a very known project in distributed systems. So the developer might forget this missing log statement, and perhaps that missed statement was important for something. But the developer could also miss an important variable to provide additional context of specific case as a normal situation in the system. And here's also a real case in Apache Skywalking, which is a system for performance monitoring. Or perhaps the developer didn't get the log statement in the correct format in the first moment. So in this example, the original statement was in the IFO level, but it was too verbose, generating too much data, so it required to be changed. And notice that this was considered as a bug, and it was prioritized with as a major issue. So the literature shows several problems associated with improper logging. So for example, improper logging messages might cause problems when parsing for data injections and many things. There are the reference if you want to take a look. So the key question in my PhD is how to help developers to make better logging decisions when implementing and maintaining logging code, because it's not always possible to write a test for it, or it's not always possible to start a large application in a development machine. So the developers always need to implement the changes, see how it behaves, and make changes. So the idea is to anticipate those changes. And to this end, I want to leverage machine learning for software engineering to extract the patterns, the logging patterns in source code to help the developers to make better decisions, or at least be aware of the what are the common patterns in the source code. So in the first moment, I'm focusing on the placement problem. And the motivation here, my current work is prediction at method level. So basically, imagine that a developer is working on a new functionality and there is a new method. So should that method be logged or not? And why am I focused on this at the moment? So I did a preliminary study in 5 release branches, and on that study, I saw that log-related changes occur very frequently, despite all the effort of the engineering team. Log statements are predominant. Addition of log statements are predominant among the other activities. And the related work goes in a more fine-grained, so at statement level. But they are limited to if-else statements, try-catch contexts, and they have some assumptions on the source code, like, well, it's not always clear that the if statement happened because of the log statement or the other way around. So we propose some research questions. I'm running to make sure we are in time. So the first question is, what is the performance of machine learning models in predicting log placement in a large-scale system? The second research questions address the problem of imbalanced data, because as you can imagine, there are less log statements being logged. So it's only a tiny fraction of the methods, and that might impact the performance of the machine learning algorithms. The third question is to address the relevance of predictors in the machine learning models. And the fourth research question address the feasibility of learning from open source data to a industrial case, for instance. So yes, the idea is learning from code metrics. It's a binary classification problem. We have the data, we have the features, we are experimenting with some simple models. And then you might ask, what about the bias in the data? Because the existence of log statements in the source code might affect the distribution of the metrics we use as predictors. And also counting the number of try catches might provide hints to the models. So we do some program code transformation to remove log statements. And we also don't count number of try catches to make sure that we reduce this bias as much as possible. We have some preliminary results for the first research question. So the model that performs the best was random forest with a precision of 80%, with a recall of 62%. And yes, just to summarize, sorry for running out of time. So the big picture is help developers to make better decisions, logging decisions, and use machine learning to extract patterns and help the developers to make better decisions. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Matteo, I have yeah, of course I have questions.
Yes, I omitted many details here to make sure you're in time and to provoke questions as well.
Thank you. Nice presentation. Thank you. So there is one problem with logs is the abstraction of logs, because many times you have to recognize logs among different events, right? So there may be just little differences. There can be numbers or acronyms that make them different, but they are not different, in fact. So abstraction of logs, how do you deal with abstraction of log in your let's say work? And the other thing is about duplicates of log in the code. And so you might have different placements, let's say, of the same log or log type or abstraction of log into the code. So you might not have one single placement for that log.
Hello?
How do you deal with both problems?
Yes, okay. Okay, so the question is how the question boils down to how do I identify log statements in the code, in the source code. Is that correct?
Yes, in the sense how to abstract. So one of the problem of the logs is to abstract them, to give like them like an abstract structure, so that you can so that you can you know, identify them either in the code or in the log files and so on. Yeah, and the second question is if you have once you have abstracted them, you might have duplicates. So you might have duplicates in your case it would be 2 placements in the code which this abstraction can fit. So how do you deal with both problems?
I see what you're asking. So regarding the first question, how do I identify those abstractions? So one good thing about working with a company is that they have some standards. They have a standard API for and a standard structure as well. So I leverage this defined structure to identify those abstractions when I'm parsing the source code. So this is how I identify, and to handle the situation of open source projects, I tried to generalize as much as possible this identification process to be able to do that in open source as well. And regarding duplicates, because as you mentioned, perhaps in the same location could be a log statement that could be a warning or another severity, for instance. So in this work, we are not capturing the details about differentiating the different abstractions. We consider a method to be logged or not simply based on the presence of a log statement in the source code. This is how we extract the features. So we are for us we abstract all the different abstractions into a single abstraction. But in future work, later in the PhD, the idea is to be able to have more fine-grained recommendations as well. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we can chat offline, of course.
Sure.
Sorry, do we still have time?
For one question. Yeah, sure.
Jean, thanks a lot for the presentation.
Hi.
It was really cool. Yeah.
And it was really, really interesting for me because my master thesis topic was really, really similar. So I was also trying to predict the location of log statements and also the login level. And yeah, so yeah, if you want, yeah, we could yeah, chat about it at some point.
Yes.
And also, like, the question would be, did you try using neural networks like LSTM?
Not yet, because the way we framed the problem was this, yeah, like the way we frame it was simply as a binary classification problem, in a way that the features we extract from a method, we can summarize using code metrics, just because it's easy to compute code metrics, and we didn't have to implement any model. We use scikit-learn, and we feed the existing models already there. So just because it was more straightforward and yeah, easier. But of course, if you want to go to a more fine-grained prediction, say identifying the exact statement that a log statement should be, you can't use you can use code metrics for that. You need something able to capture more context, such as a neural network or a deep learning architecture in general. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Right. Thanks.
Nice, nice. Yes.
Okay. However, you all have the contact, the email of the speaker. So if you want to continue the discussion offline, you can arrange something, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we can go ahead with our let's say previous speaker.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay. Right. So you can share your screen and start.
Yeah, I need, yeah, okay, perfect. And I hope it will be quicker than last time. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Guillaume and I'm a PhD student in my first year at University of Luxembourg. And my domain of research is machine learning for CI and regression testing. So the overview of my work since I arrived last year, the goal that I have right now is to develop a cheap, automated and fast approach to detect flaky tests. So here I'd be grateful if you could say using the yes and no buttons in the chat if you ever heard about flaky tests. In any case, I will try to answer what's a flaky test. A flaky test is a test case that can pass or fail for the same piece of code after several reruns without changing the code. So you might have found some tests like this. Why does this matter? This is time consuming to debug for developers, especially if they have struggled to reproduce the behavior of the test. And then at the end, it will lower their trust in the test process, meaning that they might end up ignoring the test, even though the test could highlight a real bug. I want to reduce the machine cost in CI, and we'll see in the following slides why this is at a cost. And overall, I want to improve quality and trust in test suites. So this is an example of a flaky test. Here we have a unit test that does a couple of instructions. And the key thing is that as an annotation, there is a timeout of 2 seconds. And we can imagine that sometimes the test will have the time of computing everything, sometimes it won't. Oops. So some real life scenarios at Google, John Miko said that test flakiness is a huge problem. There is 150 million test executions per day, and almost 16% of their 4 million tests have some level of flakiness. And at Facebook, flakiness was a main topic among the requests for proposals at the testing and validation symposium last year. About the state of the art now. So in the industry, and taking the example of Google again, they spend between 2 and 16% of their compute resources rerunning flaky tests. So the simple and main idea so far is to rerun the test that fails to see if they won't pass after a couple of reruns to detect flaky tests. And for the research community, the interest is recent. And so a couple of empirical studies have been carried out in the past years. So the first one is the large empirical analysis of flaky test in FSC 2014. And another one was done in Microsoft, at Microsoft, and trying to root cause the flaky test in ISTA last year. Some tools were suggested, like deflacker and ID flackies, to try to automate the detection of the flakiness in INCSI 2018 and ICST 2019. Now about my work. So here I have a reminder of my goal is to develop a cheap, automated and fast approach to detect flaky tests. So the problem right now is that the dynamic approach, as the two tools presented and the rerun approach, they are costly in CIs. So I want to avoid the cost of dynamic analysis, and I don't want to use any code coverage things or anything. I want to use static analysis, basically machine learning on source code and trying to predict based on the source code only. So far, I am comparing 3 different approaches using machine learning that I developed. The first one is using code metric from the test. The second one is using bag of words as a feature, and I'll explain in the coming slide how it works. And the last one is using the same as the second one, but also taking into consideration the code under test, as the code under test could be a reason of flakiness. So I'm using a data set of 3,000 tests labeled as flaky or non-flaky. So it's a binary classification taken from open source projects. So for the first model that I have, I'm using code metrics listed here that I think are could be reasons for the flakiness. So we can see that using random or using files, depending on dates, could be a reason of flakiness. So this was my metrics. The second model, using the bag of words. So for those who don't know what's a bag of words, I want to represent the raw source code of each unit test as a vector. And to do it, I tokenize the source code and vectorize it. And here is an example. So if I want to represent the bag of words for the sentence, it is the best of the best, I would simply count the occurrence of each word and put it in the array that you have on the right. And for the third model, bag of words plus code under test. So here, the idea is to use information retrieval, again, not using simple code coverage because it would require time and machine time as well, to find the most similar methods in the code, the most similar methods to the test. And here, if you know information retrieval, the test is considered as the query, and the set of the existing methods in the code under test are the documents that I want to match to the query. So here are my current results. For the first model, it didn't meet the expectations that I had. I have an F1 score of 45%. The second model, using the bag of words, was obtained more interesting results. I had a F1 score of more than 90%, but it is using the whole data set across all the projects. So I had more data. And if I use my model only inside one project, the results will drop. So the third model increased the performances intra-projects up to 37% for the F1 score. So this is my current results, and that's all I had to show. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems that the next tutorial tomorrow morning is that one for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for it.
Okay. So there are questions, comments, or?
Yes, I have a question, Michael, here. So thanks for the well-structured talk. I mean, flakiness is often caused by the test environment, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So is this then, let's say, enough reflected in the test code only, or would it also make sense to at least consider infrastructural code as well?
Well, the state of the art lists the reasons of the different causes of flakiness with some categories, and also the proportion of flaky tests among each category. And so indeed, environmental causes are a thing, but I decided to focus on what I could learn from the source code, as it's still a big part of the causes from flaky tests.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question also on that. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just I want to complete maybe my answer. Some of the environmental cause could be, for example, if you rely on another microservice or another website for the answer, the response of another service, and this could be also found in the source code with some keyword of inside the source code.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is, but I think to also consider this infrastructural perspective in the code, or even in infrastructure as a code. So yeah, but I think it's a good starting point, but take that into account, I would say.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, in fact, my question is related to that. So you mentioned that you have already a label sample, right? So how do you define these labels? And for example, you gave us an example of annotated method with the time for the test, right? So
what do you mean by time? Ah, the timeout.
The timeout. Yeah. The time parameter for the annotation. So this is an example in which you can have this flaky test, but is that you're searching for? So what are the labels and how you produce these labels?
So the dataset is really something that is missing in this area, because it's really difficult to find the flaky test and to keep track of them. So the dataset that I used is from one of the dynamic tool that I talked about, the deflacker one. They don't have a lot of flaky tests, just enough to do machine learning, I would say. And they labeled it as flaky or not based on the, let's say, smart rerun, and having the proof that the test was failing and passing on the same version of the code.
Okay, so your plan is to also to create like a pattern, so like a set of labels for future use, or chapter, because this is like you ran the test, right? So, but it would be nice to have some patterns in the code.
Exactly. So far, it's only if it's flaky or not, the label. And my future work is to work more on the explainability of the cause of the flakiness.
Yes,
I can already find with the bag of words the most important words linked to the decision, and I get some idea of why there is some words linked to the flakiness in the tests. And this is my future work. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Other questions?
We also have a suggestion in the chat. You maybe take a look at this link, because it's a very fresh paper about these topics. So maybe, I don't know if you are aware of this.
I might be, I should be. I cannot see the chat. Yeah, okay. So yeah, indeed, I'm very aware of this test. The third model brings not test paper, and the third model that I presented here brings a novelty compared to this paper. Also, I didn't want to talk about it because it would have been it would have taken more time in the presentation to explain the difference.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for the link.
Okay, thank you very much again. And yeah, I think that we can go ahead with our next and final speaker, Queen Song. Are you connected? Are you online?
Yes.
Okay. You can start whenever you want.
Yeah. So do you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Queen Song. I'm a PhD student at Lund University in Sweden, and I started earlier this year at the beginning of January. So I'm still at the very initial stage of my PhD study. My supervisors are Professor Per Runeson and Dr. Emily Inningström. My research subject is about software testing of autonomous systems. So I will just directly jump into my presentation. In later days, there are many autonomous systems that already existed in different application domains, such as the robotic systems for different purposes and the autonomous vehicles, which they are supposed to handle different tasks within an unstructured environment without any human supervision or intervention. So it is extremely important for us to ensure that the system will operate correctly and safely all the time. So to be able to test such systems, there are certain problems to be considered. One of them is the explosion of the state space due to, for example, the unpredicted environment conditions. So the system might run into the situation which are unknown during the design phase. And also the non-deterministic behaviors. So the system will learn from the experience and adapt its behaviors dynamically. And this also increased the system complexity. As a result of it, it is impractical or even say that impossible to conduct exhaustive testing to cover all possible scenarios. And yet another problem, as to the extent of my knowledge, there is no such a universal safety standard or general approach for testing such systems that has been settled by both the academia and the industry. And there are very limited tools, guidelines, process, and engineering practices that has been studied so far. So testing of autonomous systems remain an unresolved area, and it has to be improved aggressively. The absence of the appropriate testing may cause catastrophic losses, as most of them are safety critical systems. There are some examples that have been reported before. So fatal accidents caused by Tesla and Uber autonomous car back in 2018, where there were actually pedestrians being killed. Another example could be the crashing of the Mars lander back in 2016, most likely due to an implementation error, had a cost at least $350 million in lost equipment and time. So we looked into the existing literature, see what has been published from the academia side and also from the industry side. So there are studies that proposed, for example, using the model-based approach. So they establish a model to describe the system. And based on that, they can do the model checking and automate test generation and execution. Also, the formal method is another mathematical way to formally prove the system specifications still hold. In some other studies, they used this combinatory testing to reduce the test effort, and also the metamorphic testing to address the test oracle issues. There are also some other techniques that has been investigated among these publications, such as fault injection, safety cache, and search-based testing, etc. either to automate the test generation, analysis, and execution, and also to reduce the test effort or address the corner cases, etc. So there are some practices, engineering practices that had been suggested in some publications, for example, using the simulation environments for the virtual testing, which could include the hardware or the vehicle in the loop. And in some other studies, they suggested using this V model process for development and test of the autonomous system. In some other studies, they also proposed the architecture to really monitor the operation during the runtime and also collect the online data for the future tests. So based on this existing literature study, our proposal is to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency for testing of autonomous driving features by identifying the worst case scenarios with some optimization mechanism and the simulation platform. This proposal is still on the discussion, so we are still working on that. At this moment, I can only extract some general procedures that which are very high-level abstractions. That include, first, we're gonna generate the initial test scenarios from the specifications, such as the system requirements and the accident reports, etc. And then we will execute those test scenarios in the simulation platform and try to optimize the objective functions based on the test results. And the last step is to try to identify the most critical scenarios based on the acquired test results. So we are at this moment, we are doing 2 research studies. The first one is a survey study to explore the challenges and techniques as well as good practices for testing of autonomous systems. To be able to do that, we have conducted a focus group discussion with some practitioners from the industry, and we are planning to do some interviews towards experts from different companies within this domain. And the last step is a questionnaire to validate our findings from the previous activities. And the other study, which is also ongoing, is a case study. We collaborate with a car corporate, and we try to experiment with a worst-case scenario identification approach for some low-speed maneuvering autonomous applications. As I already mentioned, because I'm still really in this very initial stage of the research, so right now I cannot show any figure or any data from that because those studies haven't actually been finalized yet. So I'm happy to hear your suggestion, or anyone might share some experience in the similar area. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that this is a very initial stage work, so I don't know whether the the form could be useful in this case, but however, let's try to provide to you useful comments and suggestions during this question and answer session. And there is are there questions from the audience or from the experts? Otherwise, I can start by commenting something. So you mentioned in the big, a couple of slides ago, you said that you basically want to generate tests from specifications.
Yes.
From the specification of these kind of systems that include machine learning components. So I mean, this is very interesting and challenging, and especially challenging because I think that in this case, in this context, machine learning, AI-based systems in general, are very uncertain, let's say, in the behavior. Also, the surrounding environment is something that continuously change and is very you know, the system is affected by sources of uncertainty, and specification are something that, I mean, formal or semi-formal specification here is something that is difficult to achieve, right? So do you have some initial idea of how to tackle these challenges, or?
We still haven't looked into any details on that, but the idea is that we would focus on a concrete functionality, say, for example, the automatic parking or some and others, and we try to collaborate with some companies that work in this area, and we're going to consult with some experts, they are test experts. We see if we can extract some kind of like initial test scenarios from those specifications.
So at the end of the day, do you intend to generalize from autonomous driving to general procedure for testing autonomous systems, or do you especially want to focus? Because I guess there are some domain-specific aspects that you always have to take into account.
To start with this research subject, I mean, autonomous system is kind of like too broad to focus on. So we must address some kind of like a context, like autonomous driving. But the intention is that we would find some test approach which can be generalized to the other autonomous systems as well.
Maybe a short question. Do you foresee any linkage between the two studies you planned, or they are independent with each other, from each other?
Yeah, because at the beginning we had very little experience in the relevant area, and so the survey study is pretty much just to explore that what has been done and what people are thinking about it within this area. And then the second case study is actually we step into the area, we step into this domain to really experiment with some test approach that could be feasible.
So you have the company that are willing to collaborate with you to allow you to experiment.
Yeah, we are negotiating that.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. There are maybe a very last quick comment or question if someone else want to add something. There is something, no? Okay, in this case, yeah?
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Okay, okay. Let's thank again the last speaker. Thank you very much, and I think that this concludes this overall session. I want to thank you again. You know, the speakers for their commitment, for their participation. We had a very good presentations. I hope that you received good comments and interesting questions. But however, we also exchange, you know, our contacts, so you can continue discussions offline if you want. Okay, so thank you very much again to everybody connected, and also thank you again. I want to thank again the committee, the experts that you know, issued questions and so forth. So thank you very much, and I want to remind you that this is not the last session of the day. There is another session. It's a social event, so it's a very relaxed, in a very relaxed setting and friendly environment. So I invite you all to participate, and it is starting right now. So let's just shut down this session and connect again. Okay, so thank you all again, and see you.
Bye.
Bye bye. See you.
Bye.
Bye.